which will come upon the land of Egypt, so that the land may not perish in the famine. The plan pleased Pharaoh and all his courtiers. And Pharaoh said to his courtiers, "Could we find another like him, a man with a divine spirit?" So Pharaoh said to Joseph, "Since God had made all this known to you, there is none so discerning and as wise as you. You shall be in charge of my court, and your command shall all my people be directed. Only with respect to the throne shall I be superior to you." Pharaoh further said to Joseph, "See, I put you in charge of all the land of Egypt." And removing his signet ring from his hand, Pharaoh put it on Joseph's hand, and he had him dressed in robes of fine linen and put a gold chain about his neck. He had him ride in the chariot of the second in command, and they cried before him, "Abek." Thus he placed him all over the land of Egypt.
Thank you so much. And Margot, would you like to read starting at verse 44?
Yes, thank you. Pharaoh said to Joseph, "I am Pharaoh, yet without you, no one shall lift up hand or foot in all the land of Egypt." Pharaoh then gave Joseph the name Zapheth Paneah, and he gave him a wife, Asen, daughter of Potiphar, priest of On. Thus Joseph emerged in charge of the land of Egypt. Joseph was 30 years old when he entered the service of the Pharaoh king of Egypt. Leaving Pharaoh's presence, Joseph traveled through all the land of Egypt. During the 7 years of plenty, the land produced in abundance, and he gathered all the grain of the 7 years, and he gathered 7 years that the land of Egypt was enjoying, and stored the grain in the cities. He put in each city the grain of fields around it. So Joseph collected produce in very large quantity, like the sands of the sea, until he ceased to measure it, for it could not be measured.
Thank you, Margot. And Kath, would you like to read starting at verse 50? And you'll need to unmute, Kath.
Rabbi, I'll try again. Before the years of famine came, Joseph became the father of 2 sons, whom Asnath, daughter of Potiphar, priest of On, bore to him. Joseph named the firstborn Manasseh, meaning God has made me forget completely my hardship and my parental home. And the second he named Ephraim, meaning God has made me fertile in the land of my affliction. The 7 years of abundance that the land of Egypt enjoyed came to an end, and the 7 years of famine set in, just as Joseph had foretold. There was famine in all the lands, but throughout the land of Egypt there was bread. And when all the land of Egypt felt the hunger, the people cried out to Pharaoh for bread. And Pharaoh said to all the Egyptians, "Go to Joseph. Whatever he tells you, you shall do." Accordingly, when the famine became severe in the land of Egypt, Joseph laid open all that was within and rationed out grain to the Egyptians. The famine, however, spread over the whole world. So all the world came to Joseph in Egypt to procure rations, for the famine had become severe throughout the whole world.
Thank you, Kath. And Robert, would you like to read at the very start of chapter 42?
Yes, thank you. Now, when Jacob saw that there was corn in Egypt, Jacob said unto his sons, "Why do ye look one upon another?" And he said, "Behold, I have heard that there is corn in Egypt. Get you down thither, and buy for us from thence, that we may live and not die." And Joseph's 10 brethren went down to buy corn in Egypt. But Benjamin, Joseph's brother, Jacob sent not with his brethren, for he said, lest peradventure mischief befall him. And the sons of Israel came to buy corn among those that came, for the famine was in the land of Canaan. And Joseph was the governor over the land, and he it was that sold to all the people of the land. And Joseph's brethren came and bowed down themselves before him with their faces to the earth. And Joseph saw his brethren, and he knew them, but made himself strange unto them, and spake roughly unto them. And he said unto them, Whence come ye? And they said, From the land of Canaan, to buy food. And Joseph knew his brethren, but they knew him not. And Joseph remembered the dreams which he dreamed of them, and said unto them, Ye are spies, to see the nakedness of the land ye are come. And they said unto him, Nay, my lord, but to buy food, for thy servants come. We are all one man's sons. We are true men. Thy servants are no spies. And he said unto them, Nay, but to see the nakedness of the land ye are come. And they said, Thy servants are 12 brethren, the sons of one man in the land of Canaan. And behold, the youngest is this day with our father, and one is not. And Joseph said unto them, This is it that I spake unto you, saying, Ye are spies. Hereby ye shall be proved. By the life of Pharaoh ye shall not go forth hence, except your youngest brother come hither. Send one of you, and let him fetch your brother, and ye shall be kept in prison, that your words may be proved, whether there be any truth in you, or else by the life of Pharaoh, surely ye are spies. And he put them all together into ward 3 days. And
Thank you so much, Robert. Let me invite Jim. Would you like to read a little bit starting at verse 18?
Thank you, Rabbi. On the third day, Joseph said to them, Do this and you shall live, for I am a God-fearing man. If you are honest men, let one of your brothers be held in your place of detention, while the rest of you go and take home rations for your starving households. But you must bring me your youngest brother, that your words may be verified and that you may not die. And they did accordingly. They said to one another, Alas, we are being punished on account of our brother, because we looked on its anguish, yet paid no heed as he pleaded with us. That is why the distress has come upon us. Then Reuben spoke up and said to them, Did I not tell you? Do no wrong to the boy, but you paid no heed. Now comes the reckoning for his blood. They did not know that Joseph understood, for there was an interpreter between him and them. He turned away from them and wept, but he came back to them and spoke to them, and he took Simeon from among them and had him bound before their eyes. Then Joseph gave orders to fill their bags with grain, return each one's money to his sack, and give them provisions for the journey. And this was done for them. So they loaded their asses with the rations and departed from there.
Thank you, Jim. Let me invite Robin, if you'd like to read starting at verse 27.
Yes, thank you, Rabbi. When at the night lodging, one of them opened his sack to give fodder to his ass, he saw his silver. It was in the mouth of his bag. When he said to his brothers, My silver has been returned. Look, it's in my bag. Their hearts gave out, and trembling they turned to each other and said, What is this that God has done to us? They then came to Jacob their father in the land of Canaan and told him all that had befallen them, saying, The man who was Lord of the land spoke roughly to us. He treated us as though we were spying out the land. We said to him, We are honest men. We have never been spies. We are 12 brothers, sons of the same father. One is no more, and the youngest is with our father right now in the land of Canaan. That man, the Lord of the land, said to us, This is how I will know that you are honest. Leave one of your brothers with me, Take relief for the starvation of your families and go and bring your youngest brother to me. Then I will indeed know that you are not spies, that you are honest. I will give you back your brother and you can pass through the land." When they emptied their sacks, each one's money bag was in his sack. And when they caught sight of their money bags, they and their father, they were struck with fear. Their father Jacob said to them, "You have left me bereft. Joseph is no more, Simeon is no more, and now you would take Benjamin from me? All these things have come down on me." Reuben then said to his father, "Put my 2 sons to death if I do not bring him back to you. Give him into my hands, and I will return him to you." But Jacob said, "My son shall not go down with you. His brother is dead and he alone remains. If a disaster should befall him on the way that you will be going, you would cause my gray head to go down in anguish to Sheol."
Thank you, Rabbi. Martin, would you like to read at the very start of chapter 43?
Thank you, Rabbi. But the famine in the land was severe, and when they had eaten up the rations which they had brought from Egypt, their father said to them, "Go again and procure some food for us." But Judah said to him, "The man warned us, 'Do not let me see your faces unless your brother is with you.' If you will let our brother go with us, we will go down and procure food for you. But if you will not let him go, we will not go down. For the man said to us, 'Do not let me see your faces unless your brother is with you.' And Israel said, 'Why did you serve me so ill as to tell the man that you had another brother?' They replied, 'But the man kept asking about us and our family, saying, "Is your father still living? Have you another brother?" And we answered him accordingly. How were we to know that he would say, "Bring your brother here"?" Then Judah said to his father Israel, "Send the boy in my care, and let us be on our way, that we may live and not die. You and we and our children. I myself will be surety for him. You may hold me responsible. If I do not bring him back to you and set him before you, I shall stand guilty before you forever. For we could have been there and back twice if we had not dawdled."
Thank you, Martin. And Paul, would you like to read starting at verse 11?
Thank you, Rabbi. Israel, their father, said to them, "If it must be so, then do this. Take of the land's glory in your baggage and bring it down to the man as a tribute. A bit of balsam, a bit of honey, wax, lotus, pistachios, and almonds. And take with you double the money, and the money that was returned in the mouth of your sacks, return in your hands. Perhaps it was an oversight. Take your brother and arise, return to the man. And may El Shaddai grant you mercy before the man, that he may release to you your other brother as well as Benjamin. And as for me, as I have been bereaved, so am I bereaved." So the men took the tribute, and they took double money in their hand, as well as Benjamin. They set out and went down to Egypt and stood before Joseph. Joseph saw Benjamin with them. So he said to one in charge of his house, "Bring the men into the house. Have meat slaughtered and prepare it. For with me will these men dine at noon." The man did as Joseph said, and the man brought the men to Joseph's house. But the men became frightened when they were brought to Joseph's house, and they said, "Because of the money replaced in our sacks, originally are we being brought so that a charge can be fabricated against us, that it crashed down on us, and that we be taken as slaves along with our donkeys." They approached the man who was in charge of Joseph's house and spoke to him at the entrance of the house. And they said, "If you please, my lord, we have indeed come down originally to buy food, but it happened When we arrived at the inn and opened our sacks, that behold, each one's money was in the mouth of his sack, and it was our own money in its full amount. So we have brought it back in our hand. We have also brought other money back down in our hand to buy food. We do not know who put our money in our sacks. He replied, peace be with you, fear not. Your God and the God of your father has put a hidden treasure in your sacks. Your payment has reached me. And he brought Simon out to them.
Thank you so much. Susan and David, would you like to read starting at verse 24?
Muted.
Yes, thank you, Rabbi. And the man brought the men into Joseph's house, and he gave them water, and they bathed their feet, and he gave provender to their donkeys. And they prepared the tribute against Joseph's arrival at noon, for they had heard that there they would eat bread. And Joseph came into the house, and they brought him the tribute that was in their hand into the house, and they bowed down to him to the ground. And he asked how they were, and he said, all is well with your aged father of whom you spoke. Is he still alive? And they said, all is well with your servant, our father. He is still alive. And they did obeisance and bowed down. And he raised his eyes and saw Benjamin, his brother, his mother's son. And he said, is this your youngest brother of whom you spoke to me? And he said, God be gracious to you, my son. And Joseph hurried out, for his feelings for his brother overwhelmed him, and he wanted to weep. And he went into the chamber and wept there. And he bathed his face and came out and held himself in check and said, serve bread. And they served him, and then separately, he served him and them separately, and the Egyptians who were eating with him separately. For the Egyptians would not eat bread with the Hebrews, as it was abhorrent to Egypt. And they were seated before him, the firstborn according to his birthright, the youngest according to his youth. And the men marveled to each other, and he had portions passed to them from before him. And Benjamin's portion was 5 times more than the portion of all the rest. And they drank, and they got drunk with him.
And he commanded the one who was over his house, saying, fill the men's bags with as much food as they can carry, and put each man's silver in the mouth of his bag, and put my cup, the silver cup, in the mouth of the youngest one's bag, and the silver for his grain. And he did according to Joseph's word that he spoke. The morning was light, and the men had been sent away, they and their asses. They had gone out of the city. They had not gone far. And Joseph had said to the one who was over his house, get up, pursue the men, and you'll catch up with them and say to them, why did you pay back bad for good? Isn't this the thing from which my Lord drinks? And he divines by it. You've done that, this thing that you've done. And he caught up with them and spoke those things to him. And they said to him, why would my Lord speak things like this? Far be it from your servants to do a thing like this. Here, we brought the silver that we found in the mouth of our bags back to you from the land of Canaan. So how would we steal silver or gold from your Lord's house? The one among your servants with whom it is found, let him die, and also will become my Lord's servants. And he said, now also it will be so according to your words. The one with whom it's found will become my servant, and you will be free.
Thank you so much, both of you. And Justin, would you like to read a little bit starting at verse 11?
Thank you, Rabbi. So they hastened, and each one lowered his sack to the ground, and each one opened his sack. He searched, he started with the eldest and finished with the youngest, and the goblet was found in Benjamin's sack. So they rent their garments, and each one loaded his donkey and returned to the city. And Judah and his brothers came to Joseph's house, and he was still there. And they fell before him on the ground. And Joseph said to them, "What is this deed that you have committed? Don't you know that a person like me practices divination?" And Judah said, "What shall we say to my master? What shall we speak? And how shall we exonerate ourselves? God has found your servants' iniquity. Behold, we are my Lord's servants, both we and the one in whose possession the goblet has been found." But he said, "Far be it from me to do this. The man in whose possession the goblet was found, he shall be my slave. But as for you, go up in peace to your father."
Thank you so much. And thank you, everyone. That's our entire Torah portion for the week. I'd like to share with you just a bit of a focus study, and then we'll have our collective conversation about it. If you have a copy of the study sheet, I invite you to take it out now. You'll notice I've entitled this study sheet Shattering and Hope. And so I'd like to begin by focusing really on the opening up of our Torah portion, which is what I have in item number 1 on the study sheet. Vayhi Miketz Shenatayim Yamim, which gets translated variously depending upon the particular edition of a translation you might have. For example, in the Jewish Publication Society and the Union for Reform Judaism volumes, they both translate these opening words as after 2 years' time. And then the Art Scroll edition translate these words as it happened at the end of 2 years to the day. What's interesting is to look at a really literal translation of what we have here, especially the last 2 words there, Shenatayim Yamim, which really means after 2 years of days. And so depending upon how you translate it, at least it conveys to me different feelings. To say after 2 years of time is a kind of a quick way of skipping over what has happened during those 2 years. You're just going from, well, there was this one period, and now we're on another period of events 2 years later. So on the other hand, to have a translation that says after 2 years of days causes us more to think about all that happened during that intervening time. And so I want to play a little bit more as we develop this study sheet with that notion about transitions in time and whether one wants to really think about what lies at one end of a period of time and then what lies at the next opening up period of time, or whether one just wants to kind of skip over all that and just focus on what's happening in this moment, which is kind of what the translation that says after 2 years of time, something happened kind of conveys. The other aspect of this opening set of words is the opening, the key word itself, which gives the name to our Torah portion, Miketz. And there's a lot of discussion about what exactly does that word Miketz mean? And there's midrash on it, and our medieval commentator Rashi kind of summarizes a lot of that, and that's listed here. His comment is right under the verse. And Rashi wrote, the word Miketz is to be understood as at the end. All words related to Ketz mean end. Now, why is Rashi making a point of this particular word? Because there are some other words in this that use the same, open up with the same letters that have slightly different meanings. And so I share those with you in the Hebrew there. So we have the verb katzatz, which means cut off. And so we get the word ketz, which usually means the end of a definite time, the cessation of time. So in that sense, when we use the word kates as it's inherited from this verb katsats, you have a sense of a complete separation, a complete division. Whereas there's another word that could be related to it, which is what Rashi is trying to reassure us it doesn't mean. And that's the word katsa, which means cut off. And from that, we get a noun katse, which means extremity, border, katsu, which means boundary. And so in his commentary, picking up on a lot of other commentaries in Midrash, he wants to assure us that the word miketz does not evolve from the word which means boundary or border or extremity. It really evolves from this word which means the cutting off of something, the end of a definite time, a cessation. I'd like to play a little bit with the possibility of what the other word that Rashi and all the other commentators want to steer us away from, what nuance it might mean in our understanding of this Torah portion, if we thought the word miketz came from this other Hebrew word, which means boundary, extremity, or border. Because when we're talking about boundaries and borders, then we have a sense in which there is this liminal moment, or perhaps a fence line, in which there's something on one side of it and something on the other side of it. And so it's that notion of looking at something, experiencing something when you're experiencing both what has come before and what is coming in the moment, what's coming next. So that's what we're going to focus on a little bit over the next couple of minutes. I'd like you to turn over the study sheet, and we're going to see how this notion about how we translate these words, how we play with these words can lead to some different understandings. In our opening session, before we started reading our Torah portion, Paul was talking about the notion of reading from Torah, and he talked about kind of overcoming this challenge of reading Hebrew out of a Torah scroll, which doesn't have the vowels attached to it, in which case you would need to make a decision of how to vocalize it. Now, in most cases, fortunately, we have generations and hundreds of years ago, rabbinic scholars who made decisions about the best way to vocalize these words. But they remain for us kind of, if you will, a field of play in which to consider different possibilities for different vocalizations. And we see that in this week's portion. So here we have chapter 42, verse 1. We have Jacob saw that there was, and then we have these three letters. And the first letter there, depending upon how you vocalize it, could either be a shin or a sin. So that word could either be pronounced as shever or sever, and they mean different words. And that's what our midrash below is going to play with a little bit. So there was shever, meaning famine in Egypt. There was also sever, which means hope. There was shever, for Joseph had been taken down to Egypt. There was sever, for Joseph had become the ruler. So here, as Paul notes, Torah doesn't decide for us on the surface how to pronounce these words. And Midrash, this Midrash here, is going to play on this ambiguity and the different possibilities. And they are quite distinct and different possibilities on either line of these words. So one vocalization, that of shever, talks of loss, death, despair, and the other pronunciation, sever, talks about hope, of life, of revival. And so the Midrash is saying both of these things existed in Egypt. There was indeed famine, but there was also hope. There was sustenance, but there was also lack. There was despair, but there was also hope. We're going to follow this through a little bit to see it's not just a matter of punctuation. In a sense, what Torah here is trying to teach us is it's also a matter of how we deal with any given moment. And that's in terms of the narrative, what Joseph is doing here. So Joseph encounters his brothers, and it provides him, in a sense, with different ways to articulate this moment. Is he going to articulate this, the presence of his brothers, as being a moment of reminding him primarily of what he has lost, of how he was mistreated, of his abuse? Is he going to focus on that? And is that how he's going to live out this encounter with his brothers? Or is he going to articulate this moment differently? Is he going to articulate this moment as possibility for revival, for reconstruction of a family? Does it provide him with a sense of hope? I don't know how you read it, but the way I read the story, to me, it's very unclear exactly how Joseph is going to treat this moment. Here in number 3, we have this verse. Vayar Yosef et Echav, and Joseph saw his brothers. Vayakirem vayit naker alechem. Joseph saw his brothers, he recognized them, and he made himself strange to them. Joseph recognized his brothers, but they did not recognize him. The Hebrew heightens this sense of drama, this tension, and the possibility of choice that's happening here for Joseph, because the word in Hebrew that means to know and to recognize also provides us the word for to make oneself strange. So there is some kind of a relationship between recognition and estrangement. It is as if they bear some kind of dynamic relationship between the two, between appearance and disappearance, between familiarity and unfamiliarity, between knowing someone and not knowing someone, and perhaps disguising yourself and revealing yourself. All of these are wrapped up in a single Hebrew root word, if you will. So it's not clear, to me anyway, that when Joseph meets his brothers, whether he means to subject them totally to an experience of humiliation, some kind of psychological torture, some kind of punishment, or if he's at the very opening up of his encounter with his brother, if he has a plan in mind to take them through some kind of process that allows the family to be restored. So this notion of estrangement as possibly part of a process for gaining a heightened sense of oneself and others is played out a little bit by the great Hasidic Rabbi, Rabbi Nachman. And he writes, a primal forgetting leads to a process of approximate reconstructions, but only if the seeker is genuinely the loser. If there is no unauthenticity in the search, such a genuine awareness of loss is the only basis for hope of recovery. Rabbi Nachman is talking about the only way in which you can gain a sense of wholeness is to begin to deconstruct yourself, perhaps. Aviva Zornberg, one of the great commentators of our time, says, forgetting, loss, and mourning engender a surge of creativity, as the fixed forms of the already said give way to the dynamic transformations of saying. We're going to look for, in a moment, at the painting that's on the front of our study sheet. And leading into that, I have this bit of description of one of the elements in the mythology of Kabbalah, and that is what's known as Shebirat HaKelim, the shattering of the vessels, which is part of the process of creation, that divine light comes into the world to be absorbed by the vessels of creation, and the vessels of creation are not able to contain the entirety of the divine light, and they are shattered, and these sparks get scattered throughout all of creation. And so this is a bit of commentary. To be honest, in 3C, I'm not sure where it came from, if I wrote this or if I copied it from somewhere, so I apologize for not having the source. The shattering of the vessels does not signify a flaw in the creative process. On the contrary, it serves a very specific and important purpose, which is to bring about a state of separation or partition of light into distinct qualities and attributes, and thereby introduce diversity and multiplicity into creation. So if you take a look at the painting on the front by Heather Ernst, earned her degree, a master's degree in architecture, and she practiced as an architect for 25 years, designing primarily large projects, retail space, medical offices, and so forth. And then she decided to give it up. She wanted to be an artist, and she became an abstract artist in particular. And so there's this very this striking in colors, this explosion that's happening here. And she titled her painting Shattered. And shattered initially sounds like something is broken, which sounds like something negative. But here's what she says on the study sheet number 3D. The synapses in our minds carry the sparks of imagination. That's where it all comes from. We create that which carries the earth through time. So for Heather Ernst, what she's trying to convey in her painting is the notion that this shattering is not actually a negative. It doesn't represent loss. It doesn't represent death. What it represents is the possibility of new life. And indeed, that's the way Kabbalah represents creation, of course, which is the presentation of new possibilities in this world, depending upon how we treat this moment of fracture. If we treat this moment of fracture as a possibility for creativity and responsibility and construction, then we can bring something new out of it. If all we do is treat it as the end of all things, then it will be the end of all things. Now, interestingly enough, also in Talmud, we have this notion that I think is related. While an embryo, a human being is taught all the Torah from beginning to end. As soon as it sees the light, an angel approaches, slaps it on its mouth, and causes it to forget all the Torah completely. So again, you can think, wow, to forget everything that you've learned, that seems like such a tragic loss. And yet I think what this message is conveying is that's the beginning of life. That because what that's doing is now it is giving you the opportunity to begin to construct. And I'd like to conclude with a word from one of the great Hasidic rabbis of the 20th century, Rabbi Kalonymus Kalman Shapira, who wrote a book called A Student's Obligation. And I bring this up because it's also related to this moment in our season. We have what we're celebrating now, the holiday of Hanukkah. And Hanukkah, the word Hanukkah, is made up of the three letters Chet, Nun, Chaf. And what those three letters really mean, they come from the Hebrew verb lachanuch, which means to dedicate. And the holiday of Hanukkah is really about the rededication of the temple, which had been, in effect, constructed by the invading enemy army. It had been decomposed and impurified. And when the Maccabees went in and recaptured it, they began to rebuild that which had been broken. So Rabbi Kalanimus Kalman Shapiro is going to play with this root word that means Hanukkah, dedication, and he's going to point out that the Hebrew word for education, hinuch, is based on the same 3 letters. So here's what he says about the meaning of education. The word hinuch, education, is a special word that implies the realization of the already inherent capacity of a person or object, the actualization of a potential. This potential will remain hidden unless we bring it out. So he's now bringing together the notion of education with its root meaning, a dedication. And of course, it also brings us to this moment of Hanukkah. What he is saying is that education requires, if you're going to be a teacher in front of a student, in order to educate the student, you need to know the student. You just can't know information that you're providing the student. You need to know the student. And you need to recognize that the student carries within him or her an understanding that you as a teacher need to bring out, help the student realize that they contain this knowledge and this wisdom. And to do that requires a search, judgment, and decision. And it's that level of inquiry, observation, and discernment that leads to the decision that lies at the heart of what we call hope. And that, with that, I'd love to open it up and hear what else you saw, how you reacted to this week's Torah portion, to the painting, to anything that we have encountered this evening. Richard?
Yes, Rabbi, thank you. 2 things you pointed out was about the double meaning of the word recognize. And they didn't recognize Joseph. They didn't recognize him when they turned him over to the Ishmaelites. And then later on, with the cup, he treats them. He says, "Did you not know that a man like me practices divination?" And my note underneath is what he's really saying is, I thought I already told you that you'd bow down to me. That he's giving them the clue to have the remembrance of who he is and he did divine, and here we are. He's brought it out of them rather than telling them, but I think he cracked the nut when he said that.
Thank you. Did you want to say something on?
Oh, I just like that. That's good. But I do have, I did just have one little thought. This looks like an egg yolk to me in the middle of this painting. I guess I had 2 thoughts. If one is able to know everything before they're born, and then all of a sudden you have to forget everything, it would be okay if you think of the moment when you first fall in love, when each one of you has fallen in love at least once in your life, and that wonderful feeling. If you experience that, and then you had to forget it, wouldn't it be wonderful to meet it again?
That's very nice. Thank you. And others, what did you see or encounter or experience in our reading of this week's Torah portion? If you'd like to raise your hand, I'd love to call upon you. There's a notion in Kabbalah, which I learned from Danny Matt, one of the great teachers of Kabbalah in our age, that says, we have forgotten ourselves into existence. And the notion that, so all of our life, in a sense, is trying to recover some kind of primal understanding of the unity of all things, rather than merely our individuation, which is what we're primarily aware of. David, please unmute and share with us.
Am I unmuted? Yes. Well, the story you tell about the angel, and then slapping the newborn on the mouth so that all of Torah is forgotten, meaning the infant, the fetus, the unborn child, as fundamentalists like to talk about in Catholics, the unborn child has a universal understanding, the understanding of allness. Well, and then the angel comes and slaps you on the mouth. And the proof of that, as everybody's heard the story before, is this little indentation on the top of your lips. That's the sign of the angel slapping your mouth and making you forget all of Torah.
Mhm.
The other take I have about that story and that understanding of understanding is the Zen teaching about child mind, which is what you have when you're first born, and you see everything all together at once with undistinguishing little bits from this, that, and the other. Then you go through a life of experience and hopefully advancement until eventually you get to the point, with great luck and hard work, or just great luck, of understanding the universe again as one undifferentiated thing, everything connected to everything, and that all the little pieces in the universe are defined, the edges of them are defined by the words we've applied to them, but the edges aren't real. They really blend into each other. And if you if you learn a different language, that language will define things differently. Like, as I understand it, yud isn't finger or hand, it's really part of your forearm. We don't have such a thing in our bodies because we are English speakers. But that's what I love about that story, is that we are relearning everything that we knew. So that in Torah study, in these studies, sometimes when I have insights, it feels like I knew it all along.
So there's the French philosopher Paul Ricoeur, who talks about first and second naivete, where your first naivete is like you just believe in an innocent way all these myths that you're being told, and then at some point you realize, oh, it's not true. There is no Santa Claus, or it's not true about that oil that lasted for 8 days. That was made up hundreds of years after the event took place. And then there's a crisis, and how one addresses and handles that crisis could mean the difference between living a life of cynicism and deepening despair, or, as Ricoeur talks about, you can enter into a second naivete, where you don't abandon your analytical capacity, but you reconstruct that myth in a way that allows you to enter into adulthood in a healthy way. So others who'd like to share something, Paul, go ahead.
When you mentioned a life of cynicism and unhappiness, I had to respond a little bit. too accurate. Okay, so I want to bring Jacob to my defense of an interpretation. They put all the silver at the top of the bags. Okay, so now one way is to look at it in saying, oh, that was very clever. But Jacob himself says, you know, that was a sinister, that was there to set you up, you know, for troubles. So my interpretation aligns with Jacob, that the idea that basically, hey, this is not a very good deed. There's an evil doer behind all this. Okay. And then the second thing about, I go further with Joseph. He says at the end, like most magicians who are dealing with an audience, you know, there's a certain amount of foolery that they enjoy, you know, that they put something over, you know, and so when he talks about the business of, hey, my brothers, you should have recognized that I'm special. I have this capability that you don't have, and kind of almost not talking about the fact that he could read dreams, but it's almost an expression of somebody who has a very big ego. So I think this time I'm agreeing with Jacob that maybe what was going on in Egypt under his son. Of course, we all know what the real story is, but unfortunately, the players in this theater, they don't know, and it's really very hurtful.
So I'm hearing what you're saying, and I'm also appreciating that Jacob at this point in his life, he is in despair. I mean, he has lost his beloved son Joseph, as far as he knows, and now he's being asked to give up his other most beloved son, Benjamin. So he is looking at the world through loss, the possibility that he could be going down into Sheol with that level of depression and despair. So absolutely. So whether or not a different state of mind could be perceiving something other than a mere scam going on is an interesting question. So let me call upon Robert, and then Kath, and then Catherine. Go ahead, Robert.
Yes, thank you again for a lovely evening. I read a few lines ahead. It was irresistible. Story has such power. And I just want to say that, Joseph has such remarkable qualities. So let me just list a few that I have seen: wisdom and understanding, patience, fortitude, resilience, forgiveness versus justice, faith, vision, a deep vision in life, deep, that lends itself to understanding. And he was very godly. And so, I love this story.
Yeah, Robert, I thank you for bringing up all those qualities. And one of the things that you made me think about is Joseph has these extraordinary gifts, which sometimes we don't associate with the same person. A person who can be a dreamer, and then a person who can be a skilled executive and administrator. Sometimes they don't go together, right? In Joseph, he seems to be able to carry forth both of those skills.
That's true.
Yeah. Lovely insight. Thank you.
Thank you. And Kath, and then Catherine.
Thank you, Rabbi. I was thinking, I'm really working on approaching each of these as if I don't know what's coming. So this is one of those parshats when it's so frustrating because we're left hanging in the middle of the story.
Right.
I refrain from reading forward. I'm waiting until Sunday before I get to read the next start. But one of the things I was thinking when you were mentioning about the education aspect of Shinuch, that it does feel very much to me like Joseph is doing an education for his brothers, because obviously they came from a place of certainly doing to him great damage or potential damage. And it feels like it's not easy for him. I mean, there are multiple times where he's weeping. I mean, I think there's a part of him that would just love to go and embrace his brothers and say, it's me, I'm okay, here I am. And he's not doing that. He's kind of playing the long game, because I think he sees maybe in his visions that aren't talked about that this is the path that needs to be followed for them to have ultimate enlightenment and understanding.
That's lovely. I myself, this year I'm reading it, and at the very beginning, I'm not sure whether he sees the possibility for revival of a family relationship, the possibility that there could be some kind of redemption, the possibility that his brothers might reconstruct and rehabilitate themselves, or whether he just sees them for how he initially experienced them when he was thrown into the pit, which was selfish, vile, jealous brothers, and whether he wants to take them either through a course of rehabilitation or a course of humiliation. It's not clear to me. So I appreciate that you have that sense of more hopefulness. Yeah, go ahead.
The one other thing I was going to say is he was his father's beloved son, and he loved his father. And because of these events that his brothers created, he has been separated from his father all this time. So when he was just asking about, is he still alive? Is this man still alive? I just felt reaching to me through the Torah was this just angst and anguish of, is my father still alive? Because that's, you know, he never had any issues with his father. I mean, they just got severed, like right in the middle of this relationship they had, it just went like this. So that was the other thing I thought about, was just how difficult.
Thank you, Ken.
It's very poignant. when
Thank
asked.
you, Ken. Let me call upon Catherine. Please share with us. Yeah.
Well, I share with Kath the idea that Joseph is, in a sense, educating his brothers, or at least trying to communicate with them. It's very important for him to leave the silver in the bag, because that's a form of communication that that things are not quite normal. It's not a normal transaction. It's something that of course he would not charge his brothers for food. So I think it's supposed to lead to some kind of questioning of, why do we have this in our bags? And he sort of then is luring them back to have further contact with them and seeing where the communication leads. So that's the way I saw it.
Thank you. That's beautiful. I really love that. Let me call upon David Susan and then Mark Thompson.
We both have something to say, and Kat's comment was great. And I think there's something really to mine about what Joseph is putting his brothers through. But what my comment was completely off track from what we're talking about. But what happened to me during the reading today was I felt really whipsawed when Jacob took off his Jacob hat and put on his Israel hat, more or less in the middle of the. So it was a little distracting because I kept looking, okay, what's different? Why, what's that trying to tell me? And so I missed some things as a result. Go ahead, Susan.
And so I was thinking that Jacob doesn't know what to do. He's beside himself. He really doesn't know. I mean, everything was going along smoothly, and suddenly he's confronted with his family that.
You mean Joseph doesn't know what to do?
Joseph, yeah. Joseph doesn't know what to do. That he's suddenly confronted with his family, and he doesn't know if he were to reveal himself, how they'd respond, knowing what they had done. And there's so much water under the bridge, you know. It's like I just see a man very conflicted with how he'd go forward.
Yeah, and that sense of conflict is revealed in how he names his children, right? Because he names them with a sense that I've done great here in Egypt, but what happened before was terrible. And so he wants his children to bear witness to both aspects. And so that sense of conflict and caring is there, evidence in his own children. Thanks. And Mark Thompson.
Hi.
Hi.
When you were going over the different meanings of the Shin Vet Resh, I kept on thinking about the word that came to mind immediately was broken, to break. And then, of course, as I want to do, I went back to my Hebrew dictionary. And as I went through the dictionary and looked through the root word, I was thinking about how I felt as we were reading this portion. And there was a heaviness about it. And the word heartbreak is shivirun, which is another aspect of this root word. So it's just the language is so rich with meanings. And that was just the overwhelming presence that I felt of heartbreak and sadness in this.
You know, you remind me that Rabbi Nachman and others talk about the breaking of a heart is such a critical aspect of one's gaining a greater sense of love, if you will. And we have the song from Leonard Cohen, right? That light, the cracks are where a light comes through. And and I quoted this section about Shevirat HaKelim, the shattering of the vessels.
Right.
The same word, right? It has the same Hebrew, that sense of breaking. And in that sense, the breaking of the vessels isn't mere cosmic tragedy. It's also cosmic opportunity, depending upon how we address that moment.
Which we'll find out in the next
the
section.
Big Bang, Richard just mentioned.
Which artist broke the egg in the picture?
Which artist, what?
The artist broke the egg in the picture. Look at the
Ah.
white and the yellow.
Oh, okay. Yes, Anna goes back to that looking like an egg yolk, the cracking of an egg in order to make an omelet. Let me do this. We began our time together by honoring Paul for his contribution and what he's going to be bringing demonstrating into the world. I want to take a moment to honor Catherine, because Catherine, if I'm correct, if I'm right, do you have a book that's being published soon? Is that right?
Yes, it's published.
Tell us about the book.
Oh my goodness. It's about television, transnational television and Latinx diasporic viewers. So it's about migration and communication.
And it's focused on what, Latin American or South American television? Is that?
Yes. Yeah,
Well,
yes. Well, that reaches people in this country.
Aha. Well, congratulations on the publication of a new book on your part.
Thank you.
And may you get great fulfillment out of it. And I'm sure all those who engage it will get a greater sense of insight as well.
What is the title? What is the title of the book?
It's called Transnational Television and its Latinx Diasporic Audiences.
Oh, okay.
Well, congratulations.
Could you put that on your website, please?
Yes, I'll put it.
Would
Would that be all right? Is there a link I can put it on so that people can find your book?
Sure.
Okay, you
Fine.
send me some kind of a link. We'll put it on the Shulchan website and people can learn more about your book. Okay.
Thank you so much.
Okay, guys,
Okay.
God bless you. And each and every one of you, I want to say this notion about we experience our human development specialists tell us that that one of the first experiences a child really has initially, of course, is the sense of attachment, especially attachment to the mother, as if the child and mother are one. And then shortly thereafter, there is that awareness of separation, that one is placed in a different room, one is taken away from the breast of the mother. And that begins either this process of individuation in a healthy way to become a unique individual standing on one's own, or depending upon the circumstances, could be severe trauma and a sense of only experiencing the world as being a series of separations and fractures and fissures. And what can make a big difference, how one deals with the necessary separations that there are in life, is to be part of a community. And our wisdom says, never separate oneself from a community, because that's what makes you aware that we are ultimately connected to one another. And that is very wholesome indeed. I wanted to say thank you to each one of you for helping to create that kind of a community of which I'm a part. I hope you all have a wonderful festival of life, because each one of you brings great light into this world. God bless you all. Look forward to our regathering. Be well, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Good night.
Chag Sameach.
Chag Sameach.
Hag Sameach.
Hag Sameach.
Night, everybody.
Bye-bye.
I like these candles.
The,